Tonight on 24, Trump says the Islamic Republic has no winning cards. The U.S. president says the only reason Iranian officials are alive is to be at the negotiating table. At the same time, Ghalibaf emphasized the necessity of releasing frozen assets and a ceasefire in Lebanon before talks. Iran International's exclusive report on disagreements among Islamic Republic officials on the eve of negotiations. Senior IRGC officials demanded limiting Ghalibaf's authority and avoiding discussions about the missile program. And 1,000 hours of internet outage in Iran resulted in damages of about 200 trillion tomans for the country's economy, the outcome of this blackout.
From Iran International, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Hello and good evening to Iran International viewers tuning in from Iran and around the world. On the eve of highly anticipated negotiations between the Islamic Republic and the United States and Pakistan, the U.S. president stated just an hour ago that Tehran has no winning cards, except for the short-term blackmail of the world through vital international waterways. Furthermore, Donald Trump explicitly wrote on his Truth Social platform that right now the only reason Iranian officials are alive is so they can negotiate. He had previously warned that if these talks fail, fully prepared U.S. aircraft carriers are ready to launch an attack with the best ammunition. Meanwhile, Mohammad Ghalibaf wrote on his X account that, before negotiations begin, two of Iran's desired conditions must be met. According to the Speaker of Iran's parliament, the release of the country's frozen assets and a ceasefire in Lebanon have not yet been achieved. These statements come as J.D. Vance, Trump's deputy, warned before his trip to Pakistan that the Islamic Republic shouldn't see deception because U.S. representatives won't tolerate it. Our correspondent, Samira Garai, has joined us from the White House. Samira, on the eve of negotiations, the saber-rattling from both sides, from the Americans and especially from Ghalibaf, has escalated. What do we know about the likely fate of these negotiations?
Fardad, what Mr. Ghalibaf wrote regarding the release of Iran's walked overseas assets shows that one of the core conditions brought up in behind-the-scenes negotiations or through messages passed back and forth is indeed the critical issue of Iran's frozen financial assets. However, it is not entirely clear which specific pool of funds he is referring to. The closest prominent case we have had in recent years was the $6 billion originally held in South Korea. It was technically released and transferred to Qatar, but the Biden administration ultimately didn't allow the Islamic Republic to actually touch it. It is highly possible Ghalibaf is referring to that exact situation. This has come from their side. They haven't brought up the enrichment issue again, but they've brought up the Lebanon issue again, and say that until that's done and these two conditions of ours are met, negotiations won't begin. Meaning, he says these two conditions must be met before negotiations begin. And right now, we know there are two planes belonging to the Islamic Republic in Pakistan's airspace, carrying members of the negotiating delegation towards Islamabad. And Air Force Two, carrying Mr. Vance, the U.S. Vice President, I think will arrive in Islamabad in about an hour or two at the absolute most. He originally departed from Europe, and Mr. Vance has been on the plane for about 5 hours now. Right before he was about to leave for this trip, the gathered press asked Mr. Vance a few questions. Even though there wasn't really a formal Q&A session, he spoke very breezy to the media as the person who is supposed to lead these critical negotiations. From 1979 until today, there is no precedent for an American delegation at this level to sit down with the Islamic Republic, whether directly or indirectly. The highest political level was the Secretary of State and John Kerry during the JCPOA negotiations. So from this perspective, it's very significant, and here in the United States, they're really hiding it up for that reason. During the brief but significant remarks he made, Mr. Vance stated, "I am optimistic if the Islamic Republic doesn't play games." Emphasizing his diplomatic stance, he added, "Our arms are open, our hand is extended to the Islamic Republic, but if they want to play games, they shouldn't be sure that the other side will want to sit down." This clear warning essentially meant they shouldn't think we'll simply go along with them. Let's go now and hear a part of his actual remarks.
Good morning. Thanks for coming.
ما مذاکره خواهیم کرد، امیدواریم که مثبت باشه. همونطور که آقای رئیس جمهورم گفت، اگر ایرانی ها بخوان که با حسن نیت مذاکره بکنن، ما هم اون رو با آغوش باز می‌پذیریم. ما به دنبال این هستیم که مذاکرات مثبتی داشته باشیم و کاملا مشخص است راهکار ما و امیدوار هستم که شما هم پرواز مطمئن و ایمنی داشته باشیم و بعد سوال‌های شما رو بعداً پاسخ خواهم داد. تشکر می‌کنم از شما.
Fardad, Vance is a prominent figure in the Trump administration who consistently seems to be against war, or at least was heavily portrayed in the media as someone who strongly opposes endless U.S. military conflicts in the Middle East. In this regard, his going there, or the fact that it received a direct green light from Trump, whether he officially sent him or Vance went at the request of the Islamic Republic, this itself is a very telling sign. But not everything is so overwhelmingly positive that it is necessarily because Mr. Trump is solely seeking an agreement by sending Vance, and there is no other alternative way. Earlier today, Mr. Trump published one of his sharpest and most aggressive statements on his Truth Social platform, elaborating on a stark threat that you yourself mentioned at the beginning of our broadcast. Directing his ire at adversaries, he bluntly says, "Do you think you have a playing card, or do you not realize you have no cards to play?" He continues by adding, "And you're only extorting the international community for a short time through an international waterway." He then concludes, "You are alive to negotiate." This is one of the sharpest threats now directed at the leaders of the Islamic Republic, meaning that if negotiations don't happen in the way Mr. Trump intends, the very life and death of the Islamic Republic's leaders are at risk. His reference is very clear. If you are here now, it's so you can come and negotiate. We had previously heard through Foss that there was a letter of safe conduct, or rather a verbal assurance had been given to those who were talking with the Americans, but we'll have to see what happens. The critical Strait of Hormuz issue is currently on the table. Regarding the Lebanon situation and Hezbollah, we know today, Friday, no new attacks have been reported in Beirut, but there have been a lot of ongoing attacks in southern Lebanon. Concerning those locked financial assets added today, we do not have any concrete information about that either. Furthermore, the Washington Post exclusively notes that the American delegation might also want to bring up the issue of releasing Iranian-American dual nationals currently imprisoned in Iran. On one hand, the Islamic Republic knows that at this negotiation table, it has to open the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States also knows that at this negotiation table, it has to give economic concessions. So we'll have to see if Mr. Trump can ultimately succeed in opening the Strait of Hormuz this way by offering economic incentives, or if they'll reach a deadlock.
Thank you, my colleague Samira Garai, joining us live from the White House. I know that in the past few hours, there have been many questions about exactly when the Iranian-American delegation will finally arrive in Islamabad. In just the past few minutes, 2 Mirage Airlines flights have been spotted moving from northeastern Iran towards Pakistan. Both operate with official government codes, one Iran 04 and the other Iran 05. Currently, these are the most tracked flights on the famous Radar 24 site that people worldwide are following closely. Both, just a short distance from each other, from northeastern Iran, it is believed, are moving from Gorgan towards Islamabad. I guess they'll arrive at Islamabad International Airport in about half an hour. The intriguing fact that 2 separate planes are moving together raises a lot of questions. We currently do not know if the arriving Iranian delegation is unusually large, or if both aircraft are heading to Islamabad strictly for security reasons. However, 2 planes departing from northeastern Iran, operating with flight codes Iran 04 and Iran 05, are steadily en route to Islamabad International Airport. Behnom Taleblu, Senior Iran Program Manager at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, has joined us from Washington. Mr. Taleblu, expectations are very high, and so are the disagreements. We're also hearing saber rattling from both Washington and Tehran. How hopeful do you think the world can be about the outcome of the negotiations?
Thank you for your invitation, Fardad Khan. Look, the question of how hopeful we can be is one thing, but how much room for despair there is, because soon after the ceasefire, or what we call a ceasefire, so to speak, both sides, publicly declared victory, and were also kind of willing to move towards negotiations that had already reached a frustrating deadlock in one round, not twice before. I mean, if we look back at those high-stakes negotiations we had in 2005 and the subsequent talks we had in 2006, both ultimately failed. They led directly to, once again, falling back on the military option for both Israel and for America. So, considering all the complex issues that really had a huge difference, a massive gap between these two delegations in both 2025 and 2026, in my opinion, that ideological difference has only deepened. That profound political gap has undeniably intensified. In observing the developments over these last 6 or 7 weeks, it has become clear that those who are, so to speak, optimistic about tomorrow's negotiations, yielding something beyond a mere ceasefire, have not correctly identified the complexities of this process. In my opinion, they are misreading the current climate. At the very, very most, what observers can realistically expect to see, and, so to speak, be satisfied with, is simply a strategic extension of these preliminary negotiations. They might agree to prolong discussions for another 2 weeks, or perhaps commit to a subsequent round of talks in a neutral third country. Ultimately, I highly doubt that both sides will achieve a complete political outcome in this first round in Islamabad.
But how likely do you see a return to confrontation? Because Mr. Trump is still threatening, American assets are still in the region, and even his movements in the Strait of Hormuz are facing a lot of questions.
Yeah, for example, something between 40 to 60%, if I'm going to speculate, the possibility of returning to fire in a ceasefire that isn't so.
If both sides want to give concessions, what would it be about? Is it likely that the Iranian side would, in your opinion, abandon its nuclear program given the approach we've seen from them so far?
Well, the Islamic Republic's bargaining power isn't just limited to the Strait of Hormuz, as you mentioned, but also to that 400 plus kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, most of which, based on Mr. Grossi's recent interview with a Western media outlet, he said most of it is in Isfahan, and some is in Natanz. If we put that 60% next to 20%, it unfortunately gives the Islamic Republic government a very high power, and actually hand that uranium, even though it's buried or gone deeper, into the country's own soil. That specific dynamic actually increases the Islamic Republic's broader deterrent power. As long as that sensitive material is simply sitting there and they intentionally do not touch or extract it, they can effectively secure a reliable kind of short to medium term survival for themselves. However, if the United States is somehow willing to compromise by loosening the heavy economic sanctions or even entirely canceling them to allow for the extraction of these materials, it would represent a massive political defeat for America. This is primarily because what former President Donald Trump had publicly and confidently told the American people was that we maintain complete satellite intelligence oversight. He assured the public that if the Islamic Republic moves towards these materials, we will swiftly use the military option. So, if these complex, ongoing negotiations go in a direction where America wants to, like, significantly loosen or completely cancel existing sanctions and pay money for something it has, so to speak, already achieved, meaning complete verified intelligence oversight, just for the physical extraction of these highly enriched nuclear materials, in my honest opinion, it ultimately counts as a kind of strategic defeat. This is because that entire maximum pressure structure would simply disappear without ever forcing any meaningful political change within Tehran's current leadership.
A new weapon that Iran seems to have acquired is this security threat in the Strait of Hormuz. Mr. Trump says that the Islamic Republic has nothing but blackmail, but in the past roughly half-century, the Islamic Republic has gained a lot of concessions from this very blackmail and hostage-taking. How much do you think this Strait of Hormuz issue has changed the situation, the bargaining chip, in Tehran's favor?
For now, when analyzing the global stock market, the highly volatile oil market, and unfortunately the prevailing narrative within the Western media landscape, recent events have undoubtedly put the ball squarely in the Islamic Republic's court. This dynamic has significantly increased the geopolitical bargaining power of what is essentially left of that survival-focused regime. However, the pervasive idea that this current escalation is some unprecedented surprise, a sudden shot to the international system, or that America was completely unprepared for this scenario, is a premise I fundamentally do not accept. The reality is deeply rooted in history. For approximately 40 years, we have continuously witnessed a predictable pattern of military threats directed at international shipping companies operating within the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz throughout the entire lifespan of the Islamic Republic. I mean, we can look back from the tanker war during the Iran-Iraq War all the way up to Obama's sanctions and the comprehensive EU sanctions directed against the Islamic Republic's oil, banking, companies, and transportation and oil refining services. At that critical time, the Islamic Republic was openly threatening, "We will close the strait." However, Obama, by deploying a second naval group to the Tunisia region, successfully kept the strait open. My primary concern today is that by covertly mining the strait, using, according to Western media reports, just between 10 to 12 naval mines, the Islamic Republic has tried and effectively managed to create this major crisis. And my primary concern is that while the Islamic Republic hasn't technically closed the strait, it has effectively taken full strategic control of the strait's critical entrance and exit. Furthermore, I highly doubt Donald Trump would ever pay money, or so to speak, offer a ransom to reopen this vital maritime route. Therefore, it seems only two realistic outcomes exist. Either the complete collapse of the Islamic Republic's deeply entrenched political military establishment can successfully open this strait, or the heavy, decisive use of formidable American military tools.
Thank you. Ben Talablu, Senior Fellow for the Iran Program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, joining us from Washington. Mr. Talablu referred to the issue of mining. The two corridors that were usually used for ship traffic, the Islamic Republic has now said that they shouldn't use the southern corridor, but rather use the northern one, which passes through Iranian islands, which might be a sign that the main corridor has been mined. According to information received by Iran International in Tehran, on the eve of negotiations between the Islamic Republic and the United States and Pakistan, a severe disagreement has been ongoing among senior government officials in Iran over the composition and authority of the negotiating delegation. Therefore, according to the information, Ahmed Vahidi, the IRGC commander-in-chief, has been trying to limit the authority of Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Abbas Araghchi. At the same time, Vahidi has called for the presence of Mohammad Bagher Zolkad, Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, in the negotiating team, which has been met with resistance from the negotiating delegation. Furthermore, the IRGC Commander-in-Chief and the IRGC Aerospace Force Commander emphasized that the Islamic Republic's representatives must refrain from any negotiations regarding their missile program. Mostafa Danishgar, a political analyst from Detroit, recently joined us. Tell me, Mr. Danishgar, how many clear signs are there that the start of these negotiations is actually turning into a series of political disputes and internal power struggles within the government?
I extend my greetings and respects to you, dear Mr. Farahzad, and to the viewers and listeners of Iran International. Well, you see, these signs are becoming clearer as time goes on. In addition to the news you mentioned, a series of narratives are being presented from within the power bloc in the Islamic Republic. I mean, just yesterday, Hamza Safavi interviewed with CNN, explaining that a significant part of the military bloc remains deeply skeptical. He noted that many within the military structure, specifically the IRGC, view these ongoing negotiations as a dangerous diplomatic trap. They firmly believe that the same deceptive surprises that occurred during previous rounds of negotiations last year will inevitably happen all over again. For this exact reason, they are steadfastly opposed to the talks. According to the detailed account provided by Yusuf Pezeshkian, the son of Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, he recently referred to a highly sensitive meeting held within the cabinet in his published daily notes. These specific writings subsequently drew fierce objections and widespread criticism from a significant portion of conservative principalists and various media activists. In this controversial entry, Yusuf Pezeshkian revealed that many high-ranking officials actively expressed deep concern regarding the United States' alarming threat that it might potentially use nuclear weapons. These disagreements have precedent, existing even during Ali Khamenei's era. Naturally, without the pillar of the system's tent to act as a final arbiter, these conflicts will escalate. This is especially true given the presence of an apocalyptic faction within the IRGC and broader power bloc, currently represented by Zolgad, Sayed Majid Musavi, and Ahmed Vahidi. And it is entirely natural that these hardliners would inevitably clash with a more pragmatic faction. This opposing group, which notably includes figures like Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, deeply understands the severe economic and political difficulty of the current situation. Consequently, they seek the soft surrender of the Islamic Republic and actively want to sign the necessary surrender documents, ensuring that this internal conflict will undoubtedly continue.
Any negotiation, whatever its outcome, can determine the fate of the Islamic Republic. How much do you think Ghalibaf, after this trip, if it reaches a conclusion, will become the de facto #2 leader of the Islamic Republic?
Well, that ultimately depends on the specific type of agreement that will be formed. The big picture of the story is that from the 12-day war, or rather, let's say from the day Donald Trump took office in the White House, it has been about forcing the unconditional surrender of the Islamic Republic. This has consistently been the overall historical trend. The United States and Donald Trump, to impose this on the Islamic Republic, have utilized alternating periods of severe diplomatic pressure, political isolation, maximum economic pressure, internal social pressure, and finally military attack. The historical trajectory of the 12-day war, encompassing what happened before it, the intense military actions during the conflict, and the tense fallout afterwards until we reach the February 28th war, all confirm this recurring pattern. This is clearly evident from one side. On the other hand, the United States has also experienced this exact pattern with Hamas. By pressuring Hamas to return the hostages, the US ultimately entrusted Hamas's fate to Israel, and currently, Israel controls roughly 2/3 of Gaza. Therefore, this critical question you raised very much depends on how Mr. Ghalibaf can manage to successfully instill and impose this soft surrender on the Islamic Republic. If he can successfully manage this incredibly delicate and complex political maneuver, he will undoubtedly secure an extraordinarily special and historic standing with the Americans. By achieving what decades of diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions could not, he will have practically brought about the exact kind of comprehensive regime change that former President Donald Trump frequently spoke of during his administration's maximum pressure campaign. Through these bold and unprecedented actions, he will have fundamentally transformed the very nature of the Islamic Republic from the inside out. In doing so, he will have dismantled the entrenched theocratic structures and effectively ensured that a monumental regime change will have genuinely occurred without the need for direct military intervention. This remarkable outcome would inevitably reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East, forever cementing his legacy in global diplomacy.
according to comprehensive tracking and analysis conducted by the global internet monitor Netlocks, there is a stark digital divide currently present within the country. The organization emphasizes that the vast majority of ordinary citizens in Iran simply do not have any chance to freely access the global web, as they are constantly hindered by severe government-imposed digital blackouts, extreme bandwidth throttling, and aggressive firewall restrictions. However, amidst this widespread digital isolation, a starkly contrasting reality exists for an exclusive group. Approximately 1% of internet users in the nation possess what is commonly referred to among insiders and tech monitors as access to the white internet or specialized white SIM cards. This privileged fraction remains completely unaffected by the sweeping national network disruptions. These individuals are not only seamlessly connected to the global grid at all times, but they are also exceptionally active and highly engaged across various international social media platforms. Benefiting from incredibly high broadband speeds, this elite demographic enjoys the luxury of posting updates frequently, participating in real-time online discussions, and flawlessly transmitting bandwidth-heavy multimedia content, such as sending and uploading high-resolution photographs, while the rest of the bytes virtually silenced. This is, according to many experts, a stark and undeniable contradiction. Ordinary society doesn't have the possibility to use even the bare minimums of digital communication. Even navigating restricted national internet services is very difficult for them. Conversely, certain privileged groups bypass these limits. Even within secure banking infrastructures designed based on the national internet, some individuals can just take photos whenever they want and send them without permission. They freely post their stuff online, or in places like Clubhouse, they can comfortably run continuous programs in support of the regime. But the more important point to consider is that, well, the ongoing issue isn't just limited to this specific problem anymore. Comprehensive data analyses clearly show that the Islamic Republic, heavily driven by the ultimate goal of controlling public information, deliberately makes everyday internet access incredibly difficult for citizens. Another critical point that international media outlets are paying close attention to is that, yeah, it is undeniably true that businesses in Iran, especially those operating as digital businesses, have practically been crippled by these harsh restrictions. However, ironically, the biggest financial profits are once again being made by opportunistic sellers of VPN services and things like that. According to one media outlet, it seems their individual revenue figures might have reached up to $5 million each over these past few weeks alone. This massive surge is happening because these services remain the absolute only way this group of people can successfully communicate with the outside world. But let me just take a moment to mention a specific number or a few startling numbers to put this financial burden into perspective. Based on the reliable data I currently have from inside Iran, citizens are desperately paying 10 million tomans to buy a mere 20 megabits of data or something around that amount, just so they can stay in touch with their families. Deliberately, such a high number makes it so that a large part of society can't easily transfer information outside the country. NPR is saying in its report that there's an intentionality behind this, so that people inside remain uninformed and those outside can't get new information. I should also make another point. The impact that the current situation has had on people's lives, well, a part of it is actually related to the university and academic sector. A recent report published by the Global University News Network emphasizes that Iranian students have lost many promising job opportunities during this difficult period of time constraints, ultimately leaving them in great professional isolation. The study reveals that roughly 3 million students practically have no access to modern data databases for their academic research. Consequently, they are trapped in an incredibly restrictive situation where they can only review their physical textbooks at home in a completely classic and traditional way.
Thank you, Ardavan Ruzbe, from our studio in Washington. Meanwhile, during the recent conflict, parts of Iran's energy facilities, including the South Pars gas field, were targeted, a field that supplies about 70 to 75% of Iran's gas. Given that natural gas generates about 85% of Iran's electricity, this is estimated to mean an 8.5 to 17% reduction in electricity production. If we attribute this disruption to the industrial supply sector, which accounts for about 25% of Iran's GDP, then the losses in this sector would be between 2.5 and 8 billion dollars. Miad Maleki, the former head of the Office of Sanctions Targeting at the U.S. Treasury Department, has just joined us live from Washington. Mr. Maleki, how do you currently assess the extent of the financial costs this escalating conflict has had on Iran's economy so far?
Thank you, Faraj, for your kind invitation to join the discussion today. Well, anyway, the financial numbers themselves are incredibly clear about exactly where Iran's struggling economy stands right now. Look, they have widespread digital communication cutoff, they suffer from severe daily energy shortages, and they have halted crucial exports and even imports because of the unstable conditions they've deliberately created in the Strait of Hormuz. If you look at these various economic damages separately, well, their individual impact can be truly devastating. But when you put all of these compounding factors together, it's actually a complete economic collapse. You actually just mentioned Iran's industrial sector. Well, when they have issues with energy and energy supply and energy exports, well, anyway, add the industrial sector to this, and I mean the non-oil industry. Economically speaking, they've reached a complete collapse. In terms of the internet shutdown, my calculation was about 20 days. I thought they could cut off the internet and Iran's economy might be able to return to normal conditions. Well, now another 20 days have passed since those 20 days. Before the conflict, well, they actually had 40%, more than 40%. The number they themselves give is more than 40% unemployment in Iran. Well, now the post-conflict situation has changed a lot in terms of jobs and stuff. And another thing I want to tell you, Faraj, you see, well, my job at the Treasury Department wasn't just about Iran. Other countries were also, anyway, part of my work in terms of sanctions and economics. The Iranian the people's endurance of economic pressure in Iran, when you put that alongside Iran's actual economic potentials, it's truly unique how much, ordinary Iranians have actually been able to endure under economic pressure. I think after the end of this, military conflict, I don't know how much more the people can endure the economic situation that has been created.
But this war also had a significant impact on the global economy, from apparently the targeting of energy and energy storage facilities like Ras Laffan in Qatar by the Islamic Republic to this very closing of the Strait of Hormuz. It has had a very huge cost, not just on the region, but on the world. How can one assess those?
You see, it's really incomparable, the impact it has had on the economies of other countries. Yes, well, some countries like Pakistan and India, well, their economies will see a serious hit because of, the gas that they actually import from Iran. But the Persian Gulf countries, the countries in the Persian Gulf region, they have other non-oil revenues that Iran doesn't have. You see, in Iran, the situation of Iran's economy was always like this. Oil exports were a source of income for the Iranian government, for state-owned companies, and anyway, for the government in Iran, and for a series of services and amenities it provided to the people. The internet had become a sector where ordinary people could generate income or create employment. They closed both of these. When we were putting together the sanctions package, at the Treasury, for the Iranian regime, the thing we always left open was issues related to the internet, so that the people of Iran could stay connected, despite the fact that the Iranian government heavily misused the internet and manipulated people's access to it. We had intentionally left this vital channel open. Now, the Iranian government itself, besides the severe impact it has already had on global oil, has implemented destructive economic and general policies that have effectively closed the internet on the people. Well, you see, this devastating internal crisis is absolutely incomparable to the economy of any other country currently affected by maritime issues in the Strait of Hormuz.
And do you think that if this war ends, if an agreement is reached, can the Islamic Republic return to where it was? Because even before this war, well, a large part of Iran's economy depended on circumventing sanctions, especially through countries like the United Arab Emirates, which, incidentally, perhaps suffered the most blows from the Islamic Republic during this war.
You see, I've heard a lot that some people say, well, anyway, they're finally coming out of these strict conditions now, and that the strategic control they had over the Strait of Hormuz might force some countries to cooperate more with them out of necessity. I don't really agree with that viewpoint at all. You see, the Emiratis have already started taking action. They started well before, and now they're actively looking to close a series of economic doors and completely halt ongoing sanctions circumvention by the Islamic Republic within the UAE. These conditions in the UAE, which was actually a lifeline, meaning, in fact, it was an open window of life, for the Islamic Republic to actually circumvent sanctions. This has been closed. The Chinese companies that were importing Iranian oil, well, now Venezuelan oil is in the market. And these, Chinese companies have learned a lot, that they can't really count much on Iranian oil. It might come one day, it might not come another day, and in the end, they might even get sanctioned themselves and come under pressure. Anyway, I think circumventing sanctions for Iran will become harder after this war issue. Its access to financial systems has always been difficult, and it will be even more difficult. And an example I frequently give is that, at the absolute peak of economic reopening during the JCPOA for Iran, even Mr. Pezeshkian himself came forward and said they couldn't find a single investor who would really commit to investing in Iran. Many foreign entities would promise capital, but as soon as they went to talk to a bank to start investing in Iran, they hit a wall. They couldn't find a bank, even independent banks that had no connection to Western economic systems, willing to take this risk and enter the Iranian market. Unsurprisingly, these severe economic conditions have become much worse for them today. My viewpoint is that, unfortunately for the Iranian regime itself, but fortunately for the Iranian people, this circumvention of international sanctions will soon become much harder. The fact that they boast they are taking money in the Strait of Hormuz from global oil companies is misleading. They can say we are taking money, but their actual access to those specific funds is another matter. Ultimately, their access to their vital oil revenue has been severely cut off.
Thank you. Miad Maleki, former head of the Office of Sanctions Targeting at the U.S. Treasury Department, joining us from Washington. Thank you again. Meanwhile, recent maritime ship tracking website data indicates a major slowdown in regional transit. Since the start of the temporary ceasefire 3 days ago until April 10th, only 19 commercial ships have been able to successfully pass through the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz. Of these limited transits, 4 were specialized tankers carrying vital shipments of oil, gas, or chemicals. The rest were registered solely as commercial bulk carriers or standard container ships. Alarming reports indicate that ships operating in the surrounding area received direct radio messages warning them that if they attempt to pass without explicit permission, they will be immediately targeted and destroyed. Our correspondent, Mariam Rahmati, is with us from the United Nations in New York. Mariam, despite reports that the Strait of Hormuz has reopened, we're seeing very limited traffic. The corridors being used are different from the old ones, and it seems these ships are still receiving direct and indirect threats.
That's exactly right, Fardad. It has become abundantly clear that the Islamic Republic is consistently using the strategic Strait of Hormuz as a primary tool for political pressure on the global stage. Even the President of the United States directly addressed this situation just minutes ago. He pointedly stated that it seems the Islamic Republic simply does not realize it has absolutely no other diplomatic leverage, relying instead on short-term blackmail by weaponizing vital international waterways. We are clearly seeing now, Fardad, that almost 3 full days after the ceasefire agreement, the Strait of Hormuz remains a highly volatile focal point of regional tensions and hasn't really reopened to normal shipping traffic. Recently, very few commercial vessels have been able to safely pass through the strategically vital strait. Those select few ships were either directly affiliated with the Islamic Republic itself, heavily linked to China, or registered to nations the Islamic Republic officially designates as its friendly allies. As you also correctly mentioned, comprehensive reports from international shipping critics combined with real-time satellite ship tracking data, clearly demonstrate that the Islamic Republic continues to maintain significant restrictive control over all maritime traffic navigating the critical Strait of Hormuz. This escalating situation is directly threatening maritime traffic, prompting many commercial ships to remain stopped in safer waters. Furthermore, according to recent intelligence reports, just in the past 24 hours, the vast majority of vessels that actually managed to pass through the strategic Strait of Hormuz were somehow linked to the Islamic Republic during this same period. At least 3 massive oil tankers, including an impressive supertanker, capable of safely carrying about 2 million barrels of crude oil, along with a dedicated refueling tanker and a smaller support vessel, successfully navigated their way. Furthermore, the large bulk carriers you mentioned previously, alongside yet another smaller ship, were able to pass through the strategic waters currently controlled by the Islamic Republic without any reported incidents. In stark contrast, however, many prominent international shipping companies that the Islamic Republic does not explicitly call friends, are still adamantly refusing to enter the volatile strait, Fardad. Various maritime sources and industry reports explicitly state that despite the recent official ceasefire announcement, these cautious international ships and security experts still firmly believe there are many lingering security risks. Political uncertainties are still rated very high, and that is precisely why, in fact, many vessels do not want to risk passing through the strait. Furthermore, there is still the persistent danger of those naval mines that, according to them, the Islamic Republic had allegedly left behind in the waters. There is also the complex issue of Lebanon, which has undeniably cast a long shadow over the Strait of Hormuz. Many countries think that the ongoing attacks Israel is carrying out on Lebanon have actually made this ceasefire agreement exceptionally fragile. Consequently, at any given moment, it is entirely possible that the parties could abruptly return to the fierce attacks that existed before, quickly reigniting these dangerous conflicts. There's also the ongoing issue of negotiations. Fardad, many experts still think that the differences and disagreements between the Islamic Republic and the United States are so significant that global markets, commercial ships, and even maritime insurance companies don't really believe that the Strait of Hormuz route can return to its pre-war state or become normal again for ships to pass. For example, cautious insurance companies are raising their risk premiums to a very significant level, and this isn't beneficial for many commercial ships that might want to safely pass right now. And also, the Islamic Republic is closely monitoring everyone navigating these critical waters, and these maritime passages actually need to happen with a strict approval and coordination of the Islamic Republic. That is precisely why Western countries are actively trying to increase diplomatic pressure on the Islamic Republic. This includes U.S. President Donald Trump, who said that a Strait of Hormuz problem will certainly be resolved with a comprehensive agreement. However, the troubling issue of them wanting to charge international commercial ships money for simply passing through the Strait of Hormuz remains another major security concern for many countries relying on this vital trade route. At the exact same time, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has notably backed down from his previous cautious positions. He recently stated that he would be fully ready to support a broad 30-nation military coalition if the United States actually wants to intervene directly to restore stability and maritime security to the critical Strait of Hormuz. Fardad.
Thank you, Mariam Ramati, our correspondent from the United Nations in New York, who was with us. Before the end of the program, I want to show you the live tracking images of Iran 04, which is one of two flights heading from northeastern Iran directly to Pakistan. It is widely believed the Iranian negotiating delegation is on board this specific plane. As you can see, it is near Islamabad International Airport. It has just made a turn, and it is expected that it will land in the coming minutes. If you look closely at the detailed flight radar map, whose live images you are seeing right now, two separate flights with codes Iran 04 and Iran 05 from Mirage Air are currently visible en route to Islamabad. This isn't just a regular transfer. It strongly seems a high-level delegation from Tehran is heading towards the location of these incredibly sensitive negotiations with the U.S. The precise timing of these sudden flights is also noteworthy. With complex regional pressures increasing, the critical window for reaching a viable agreement is severely limited, and the public saber-rattling from both the Iranians and the Americans has reached its peak. Currently, we're seeing two distinct planes en route to Islamabad from northeastern Iran. It's widely believed they're moving from near Mashhad towards Islamabad, while this specific flight originates directly from Gorgan. Our focus is on Islamabad, and you can follow the very latest negotiation results on our website, iranintel.com. And right here, tonight's 24 program also comes to an end.